Fat girl whispered, "I'll never be enough for anyone." Mountain man roared, "You're more than enough for me." Spring in Willowbrook should have been filled with joy. Lanterns swung from every post, fiddles played lively tunes, and the townsfolk gathered in their finest clothes for the annual spring festival. At the center of it all stood the contest. Everyone waited for the crowning of the spring queen. Among the hopefuls, pushed forward by mocking whispers, was Ophelia Leah Rosewood. She was not there by choice. Daughters of the wealthiest families had urged her to enter, their smiles hiding cruel delight. Leah was the daughter of a humble tailor, her gown sewn with her own hands. Her hair, a tumble of copper waves, glowed in the lantern light, yet she felt only the weight of every eye upon her. When she stepped onto the stage, the crowd erupted not in applause, but in laughter. "Look at the fat pig," someone jeered. "She thinks she can be a queen," another barked. The cruel words rained down, sharper than knives. Leah's cheeks burned, tears blurred her vision. She gripped the microphone, her voice breaking as she whispered, "I'll never be enough for anyone." The jeers grew louder, a storm of ridicule crashing over her. Just when she thought she would collapse under the humiliation, a sound shattered the chaos. "Enough!" The roar cut through the crowd like thunder. All heads turned. At the edge of the square, a giant of a man strode forward, his boots thudding against the wooden boards. Broad as a wall, towering over everyone with golden hair and a beard like firelight, Magnus Mac Ironforge looked like he had stepped from myth itself. His voice boomed again, fierce as a storm. "She is more than enough for me." The laughter died. Silence fell. And the fate of Ophelia Rosewood shifted forever. The festival square of Willowbrook shimmered with ribbons and lanterns, but for Ophelia Rosewood it felt like a stage of torment. All around her, the townspeople's faces blurred into one cruel mask, smirking lips, mocking eyes, laughter that stung worse than whips. She had never wanted to stand on that platform. From the moment the mayor's daughter and her clique had cornered her, insisting she join in the fun, Leah had sensed the trap. They had pretended kindness, praising her sewing skills, telling her it would be good for the town to see her shine. But she knew the truth. They wanted a spectacle. They wanted her humiliation to sweeten their victory. Her dress, though simple, was stitched with care cream muslin trimmed with pale blue ribbon. She had poured her heart into it, hoping the work of her hands might distract from the roundness of her figure, the softness of her arms. Instead, the crowd saw only what they wished to see, a joke. "Don't tear the stage down, girl," one farmer shouted, and the square erupted with laughter. Leah's heart pounded. She had endured whispers all her life. Too big, not pretty, never wed. But tonight the cruelty was magnified 100-fold. Her father, busy tending his tailor's stall at the edge of the square, pretended not to hear. Even her closest childhood friends lowered their eyes, unwilling to share her shame. With trembling hands, she clutched the microphone, her voice so faint it was nearly swallowed by the noise. "I'll never be enough for anyone." It was not meant for them. It was the confession of a soul worn thin, a secret thought slipped into the open air. And then came the roar. "Enough!" The crowd jolted, startled into silence. From the back, a mountain of a man strode forward, his height casting shadows even beneath the lantern light. His name, whispered often in fear and awe, was Magnus Ironforge Mac, to those few who dared speak to him. A blacksmith and miner, he was said to wield hammers heavier than most men could lift. He lived alone on Iron Peak, descending into town only to trade metalwork or buy supplies. Children called him the Giant. Grown men muttered, the Beast. His size was legend, nearly 7 feet tall, shoulders like a fortress wall, hands that could bend iron. Yet it was not his size that hushed the square, it was his fury. Who dares mock her? Mac thundered, his voice rolling like thunder off the mountainside. His gaze swept the crowd, piercing, unflinching. No one answered, no one dared. Then, to everyone's shock, he turned to Leah, and his tone shifted. The roar became a rumble of gentleness, as if his great frame held 2 voices, one to strike fear into men, another to soothe the wounded. "Do you want to stay here, Ophelia Rosewood?" he asked, low enough for only her to hear. "Or will you come with me?" Leah blinked up at him, her breath caught in her throat. Before her stood a man who could have crushed the jeers with sheer strength, yet offered her a choice instead. Her heart, still aching from humiliation, whispered the answer before her lips did. "I'll go," she whispered. He bent, extending his massive hand. His fingers dwarfed hers, yet his touch was careful, steady. As he helped her step down, the silence of the crowd grew heavier. Mac turned back once more, eyes blazing. "If any of you ever harm her again by word or by hand, you will answer to me, and I do not forgive lightly." The air itself seemed to tremble. Men swallowed hard, women clutched their children, and in that silence Leah and Mac walked away, leaving behind a square full of people who had never expected the fat girl to be defended, let alone claimed, by the giant of Iron Peak. The road out of Willowbrook lay bathed in lantern light, but as Mac led Leah farther from the square, the noise of the festival faded behind them. The fiddles, the laughter, the cruel echoes of jeers, all were swallowed by the hush of the fields at night. Leah clutched her shawl tightly, her heart thudding, torn between fear and fragile relief. She had left with him. She had stepped into the hand of the town's most feared outcast, yet instead of terror there was a strange calm. His massive stride was steady, his hand, though big enough to engulf hers, never pulled, only guided. Where are you taking me?" she asked after a long silence, her voice small against the vast dark. "To the mountains," Mac said simply. "To my cabin. You'll be safe there." The words carried no demand, no trap, only promise. Still, doubt pricked at her. "People will say you kidnapped me." He let out a low growl, not directed at her, but at the thought itself. "Let them talk. They've been talking about me for years. Their words can't touch us on Iron Peak." They reached the forest at the mountain's base. The trail twisted upward through towering pines. The air grew colder, sharper, filled with the scent of moss and pine needles crushed under their boots. Leah's legs ached quickly. She was not used to such climbs. Every few steps she stumbled on roots and stones. Each time Mac was there. His arm, solid as oak, steadied her. Once, when she slipped hard, he caught her against his chest. For a moment she felt how small she was in his grasp, yet how secure. "You're not used to these paths," he said quietly. "Lean on me when you need." "I don't want to slow you down," she muttered. A flicker of amusement softened his tone. "You're not slowing me. You're the reason I'm walking." Her breath caught. No one had ever spoken of her as a reason to do anything except as a reason for laughter. By midnight, they stopped beside a stream glistening with moonlight. Mac pulled a tin cup from his satchel, filled it, and handed it to her. The water was icy, fresh from the mountain. "You need rest," he said. "We'll stop here for a while." He shrugged off his heavy fur-lined cloak and laid it across the ground. Then he turned his broad back, facing the trees as if to guard her. "You should lie down. I'll keep watch." Leah stared at the makeshift bedding, then at his back. "What about you?" "I don't need much sleep," he said, though the weight in his shoulders betrayed exhaustion. Something in her chest tightened. In town, she had always been the one overlooked, dismissed. Here was a man giving her the best of what little he had. Carefully, she lowered herself onto the cloak. The fur was warm, carrying his scent of smoke and iron. She whispered into the dark, "Why me, Mac? Why step in tonight?" His head turned slightly, enough for her to glimpse his profile in the moonlight. "Because I've watched you suffer their cruelty long enough, and because when you whispered you'd never be enough, you were wrong." Her throat closed, tears stinging her eyes. No one had ever contradicted that belief, not her father, not the girls who laughed, not the boys who scorned her, only him. The forest hummed with crickets. The stream babbled softly. Leah lay awake long after, staring at the stars through the canopy, replaying his words again and again. "You're more than enough for me." By dawn, they resumed their climb. The sun spilled gold across Iron Peak, revealing cliffs and ridges, wildflowers trembling in the breeze. The higher they rose, the smaller the town seemed below a toy village, distant and powerless. For the first time in her life, as she followed the giant into the mountains, Leah felt the faint stirrings of hope. The path narrowed as they neared the upper ridges of Iron Peak. The climb had drained Leah, her legs heavy, her breath short. But when they crested the final rise, the sight that spread before her stole even that breath away. Nestled in a clearing of towering pines stood a cabin unlike any she had ever seen. Built of massive logs and stone, it looked less like a hut and more like a fortress, its roof pitched steep against the mountain storms. Smoke curled from a chimney as thick as a tree trunk. A wooden door, carved with runes and patterns of ironwork, glinted in the early light. Mac pushed the door open, and Leah stepped into warmth. The cabin glowed with the fire from an enormous stone hearth. The scale of everything was startling: chairs as tall as her chest, a table that could seat 10 men, beams of oak so wide they looked carved from giants' trees. Yet tucked in one corner, she noticed something different. Shelves filled with delicate carvings, a quilt folded neatly over a small rocking chair, a set of cups and plates much smaller than the rest, as if, she thought, he had once prepared for someone or hoped for them. "Sit," Mac said gently, motioning her toward the smaller chair. He poured steaming tea into one of the little cups and placed it in her hands. The porcelain looked tiny between his massive fingers, but he held it with surprising care. The heat seeped into her palms, the scent of herbs filling her lungs. Slowly, her trembling eased. "Why?" she whispered, not daring to lift her eyes. "Why did you help me?" Mac lowered himself into the great wooden chair across from her. In the firelight, he looked every bit the giant the town whispered about, shoulders like stone, beard golden as flame, eyes sharp and unyielding. Yet his voice was softer than any she had known. "Because I've seen you," he said, "not just tonight. I've watched you in the square, at your father's shop, in the market. You treat even the smallest child with kindness. You mend clothes for the poor without charge. And every time someone mocks you, I see the way you swallow the hurt and keep walking." Her throat tightened. No one had ever spoken of her that way, as if her quiet acts mattered. "But I'm not," she began. "Don't!" he interrupted, his voice deep, sudden, commanding. Then, catching her flinch, he softened. "Don't speak against yourself, Leah. You are not less. You are not unworthy. You are beautiful, though the town is too blind to see it." Tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them. She looked away, embarrassed, but Mac leaned forward, his massive hand closing gently around hers. His palm was rough, scarred from years of hammer and stone, yet his touch was tender. "You are more than enough," he said. "For me?" The days that followed took on a rhythm both strange and comforting. In the mornings, Mac rose early to chop wood or tend his forge, the clang of hammer on iron echoing through the valley. He taught Leah to stir the coals, to fetch water from the spring, to tend the chickens scratching near the cabin. At first she stumbled, unused to the work, but his patience never wavered. "You're stronger than you think," he told her one afternoon after she managed to split a log with the axe he had guided into her hands. The pride in his eyes was worth more than all the ribbons or crowns the town could have offered. At midday they shared meals at the massive table. Mac's portions were mountains roasts, loaves of bread, bowls of stew. Yet he always served her first, sliding the larger share to her plate without a word. When she protested, he met her gaze, steady and warm. "You need it," he said simply, "and I want to see you nourished." Evenings were softer. By the fire, Leah mended clothes while Mac carved wood into animals and birds. His enormous hands shaped delicate details, a sparrow's wing, a fox's tail, with unexpected skill. Once he handed her a tiny wolf he had carved. "For you," he said. She turned it over, marveling at the smooth lines. "It's beautiful." "So are you," he answered. Her heart leapt, caught between disbelief and longing. No man had ever said those words without cruelty behind them. As the mountain days turned to weeks, Leah began to change. She no longer flinched at her reflection in the polished kettle. She laughed when Mac teased her gently about burning the bread. She felt her shoulders straighten, her eyes lift, and every night, when she lay beneath the quilt in the cabin warmed by his fire, she felt something she had never known in Willowbrook: safety. For the first time, she wondered if the life she had been told she did not deserve might truly be within reach. The mountain days passed like a dream, but dreams rarely last. Word of Leah's disappearance spread through Willowbrook quickly. To the townsfolk, her leaving was scandal. To the mayor, Aldrich Blackstone, it was opportunity. Blackstone was a man of sharp suits and sharper hunger. He had long coveted Iron Peak, whispering of the veins of ore said to run beneath its rock. Gold, iron, and silver, all just waiting to be claimed. But Magnus Iron Forge stood in the way, a solitary giant guarding land Blackstone could not touch. Until now. "She's been taken," Blackstone announced in the square, his voice slick with false concern. "That beast on the mountain has her. For her safety, we must act." The crowd gasped, murmuring. Some doubted, hadn't they seen her climb willingly into his hand? But shame silenced them. Admitting she had chosen Mac would mean admitting their cruelty had driven her into his arms. And so, whispers grew into rumors. Rumors hardened into lies. Soon the town was convinced Leah had been kidnapped. Up on the mountain, Leah sensed the storm gathering. It came first in the form of a peddler, breathless from the climb, who stopped at the cabin to sell salt and spices. He glanced at Leah, then at Mac. eyes wide. "They're saying he forced you," the peddler muttered. "That you're a prisoner." Leah's heart lurched. "That's not true," she cried. The man shrugged. "Truth doesn't matter much in town. Blackstone's stirring folk up. Sheriff's on his side, too. They're planning something." When he left, silence filled the cabin. Leah turned to Mac, her chest tight with dread. "Maybe I should go back," she whispered. "If I leave, they'll stop hunting you." Mac's face darkened, his jaw hard. "No. You think crawling back to those who mocked you will keep you safe? Blackstone won't stop. He wants this mountain. He'll use you to get it." But he crossed the room in 2 strides, kneeling until his eyes met hers. His voice dropped to a low rumble, fierce but steady. "Listen to me. You are not a burden. You are not a pawn. This is your home now if you'll have it, and I'll fight anyone who says otherwise." Her eyes filled with tears. He spoke as if her worth were unshakable, as if she were the heart of all he guarded. For the first time, she believed she mattered more than the town's lies. Still, unease gnawed at her. At night, she woke from dreams of torches winding up the mountain, of jeers returning louder than ever. Mac sensed her unrest. One evening, as the fire burned low, he shared something he had never spoken aloud. "I was 12 when my parents left me," he said, his voice rough. "Too big, too strange, too frightening for them. They called me monster. I learned to survive alone. Iron and fire became my family, until you." Leah's breath caught. She reached across the table, laying her hand over his. "You're not a monster, Mac. You've given me more kindness in weeks than the town gave me in years." For a long moment their hands stayed joined, 2 outcasts bound by wounds and a fragile, growing love. But Willowbrook did not rest. Blackstone gathered a band of hired guns, promising gold and land if they rid the town of the giant and brought Leah back. The sheriff lent his badge as cover, his greed outweighing any duty to justice. On a cold night, thick with fog, their boots struck the mountain path. Torches bobbed like a river of fire climbing toward Iron Peak. Inside the cabin, Leah heard the distant clamor. Her blood ran cold. "They're coming," she whispered. Mac stood, broad frame casting long shadows across the walls. He lifted the hammer he had forged with his own hands, its head gleaming in the firelight. "They want to steal what's mine," he growled. His gaze shifted to her, softer but unyielding. "Not gold, not iron. You!" Leah's pulse thundered. She had been mocked, shamed, and told she was worthless. But here, now, she was something worth fighting for, and she would not let him stand alone. She squared her shoulders, her voice trembling but resolute. "Then let them come. We'll face them together." The first crash came at the gate boots kicking against heavy oak, fists pounding. Torches flared outside the windows, throwing wild shadows across the cabin walls. Leah's breath caught in her throat as the sheriff's voice bellowed through the night. "Mac Ironforge, hand over the girl, and maybe we'll let you live." Mac stood like a wall before the door, hammer in hand, his shoulders squared. His voice roared back, echoing through the timbers. "She's no prisoner. She's here because she chooses to be, and none of you will take her." The men jeered, shouting back threats. Then the battering began, wood splintering under axes, iron bars striking. Leah's heart pounded. She wanted to hide, to shrink away, but one look at Mac's back, unyielding, unafraid, lit something inside her. "Mac," she whispered, stepping to his side, "show me what to do." He turned, eyes blazing not with fear, but with fierce pride. He handed her a smaller hammer, the one she had practiced with at his forge. "Stay close, and remember, you're stronger than you know." The door burst inward. Blackstone himself strode in first, smug in his fine coat, pistol gleaming. Behind him swarmed hired guns and townsmen, their greed painted across their faces. "There she is," Blackstone sneered, pointing at Leah. "Poor girl, don't worry, we'll take you home." Something snapped in her. She had whispered once that she would never be enough. Now her voice rang out clear, cutting through the chaos. "I am home!" The intruders hesitated, startled. In that pause, Mac struck. His hammer swung like thunder, shattering the sheriff's rifle, sending men scrambling back. Leah darted forward, slamming her smaller hammer against a torch, scattering sparks and smoke. The cabin became a storm iron crashing against wood, shouts rising, boots stomping. Mac fought with the strength of 10, every blow fueled by years of scorn and solitude. But Leah fought too. She struck hands that reached for her, shoved back men who dared call her captive. Her arms ached, her body trembled, but she stood her ground. At last, Blackstone found himself cornered, Mac's hammer inches from his chest. The mayor's smirk faltered, sweat pouring down his face. "You'll regret this," he spat. "The town will never accept you, either of you." Mac's eyes burned. "We don't need their acceptance. We have each other." With a final shove, he drove Blackstone stumbling out into the night. The rest fled with him, torches scattering like fireflies, their courage broken. Silence returned, broken only by Leah's ragged breaths and the crackle of the fire. Her hand still shook around the hammer, but her eyes shone. She had not hidden. She had not cowered. She had stood, and she had fought. Mac lowered his weapon, crossing to her. Gently, he cupped her face in his massive hand. "You were magnificent," he murmured. "I've never been prouder." Tears spilled down her cheeks, but she smiled through them. "You said I was more than enough. Tonight, I finally believe it." And in the glow of the hearth, as the mountain kept its watch outside, Leah Rosewood knew she had become something no jeer could ever take from her, a woman who had claimed her worth. The night after the battle was strangely quiet. The mountain, once filled with shouts and firelight, had returned to stillness. The cabin stood firm, its walls bearing fresh scars, but inside the hearth burned warm and steady. Leah sat at the great wooden table, her shawl draped around her shoulders, the smaller hammer resting beside her like a token of courage. Mac moved slowly about the room, setting fallen chairs upright, pushing the broken door back into place. His movements were careful, almost reverent, as if he was tending not just to timber and stone, but to the fragile peace they had won. When he finally sat across from her, the firelight danced across his face, softening the lines carved deep by solitude. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence between them was not empty. It was full of everything they had endured. "You're safe here," Mac said at last, his voice low, steady, carrying the weight of a vow. "As long as you want it, this is your home." Leah's eyes stung with tears. She reached across the table, her small hand finding his massive one. "Home," she whispered, tasting the word like something new and precious. "Yes, this feels like home." He smiled, then rare, fleeting, but enough to send warmth rushing through her. Outside, the wind rattled the shutters, a reminder that storms would come again. The town below still whispered lies. Blackstone still plotted, and the world would never stop judging what it could not understand. But here, in the flickering glow of the hearth, none of that mattered. They had each other, and as she leaned her head against his arm, Leah wondered, could love this fierce, this unlikely, truly withstand the world beyond the mountain? Every story we share reminds us that love is not about perfection, it's about being seen, cherished, and defended for who we truly are. Leah believed she was never enough, until one man showed her that she was more than anyone could ever dream of. If this story touched you, I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from tonight? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you still believe in love that defies cruelty and conquers fear, don't wander too far. The next story waiting for you will carry that same light.